like and subscribe. Who was the worst boss you ever had? The one that insisted I was imagining things when I told him there was a gas leak, and who told me to just keep working when I later told him I was getting lightheaded. When it turned out the next day that there was a gas leak, I reported it since he wouldn't, and I confronted him about it. He told me that I should just walked out on my job if I knew there was a problem. My last boss for sure. A little backstory on him. He's an Indian who's been in the US for about 15 years and has never had a permanent position until this one. He was hired as a full-time researcher for the federal government. Some of his final moments. He completely freaked out on another female that worked there, claiming that she moved his equipment, but it was found out later that she had not moved it. He proceeded to tell her she was stupid, he didn't know why she had been hired, that she didn't know anything, that she needed to shut up and listen to him, and a bunch of other condescending things. She filed a complaint against him. This was my third week on the job. Asked me to stay late almost every day. Would get mad when I had something to do and actually left on time. Later would try to not pay me for my overtime he made me work. Only got along with one other person in a 50-person unit. Constantly would get locked out of his computer, lose his pass, break his computer. Told it lady that someone was breaking in and sabotaging him. Everything is my fault. It rained last night, Emsbum's fault we can't go out today. A program he designed and applied is set up wrong, it's Emsbum's fault. Crops aren't growing fast enough, must be Emsbum's fault. Gets mad at me for relaying a message to him, tells me that whoever gave me a master's degree should not have, that I'm too dumb to work for him, I should have never been hired, he has enough money to fire me and everyone else, and hire all new people, and that I won't be doing his research anymore. My job description, basically, tells me that in his country a woman would be stoned for speaking out against a man. This was when I began looking for other employment. I get a summer helper. My boss tells him that females should not be in the workplace. When I handed him my resignation, he asked me if I was serious. I gave him 20 days notice because I needed to use my overtime before I left, or I would not be paid for it. He tried to tell me I could not do that. Fun fact, I did. Freaks out on me after he realizes I'm leaving. Tells me I won't be hired by anybody else. Imagine my smug look when I told him I already had another job lined up. Brings in someone for me to train as my replacement. I train them, and on my last day, he tells them it's not working out. Not sure why, but I have a sneaking suspicion that he was told he wasn't allowed to hire anybody else as I was his second technician in the last 6 months. On my last day he tried to act like he didn't know it was my last day and asked me to come in the next day. Called me every day for 4 days after my official last day. Never left a message, so I never responded. Americans, your tax dollars hard at work. That man was a doozy. On the plus side, I love my new job. This question is perfect. My last day at my current company is tomorrow. I'm an account manager of sorts, and I'm a personal point of contact for support issues. This week, he sent me on a training, so my days are super busy, and I don't have a lot of time to handle bullcrap admin stuff like writing up transition docs. One of my clients is having a really bad time with some issues right now, and I've been asking him since Monday to figure out who is taking my place as their AM, so that I can get their issues taken care of. He keeps refusing, and being a little about it, and I'm not really sure why. I hate that guy right now. I sent a farewell email to my client, the guy, and told them tomorrow is my last day, and that he would be getting them in touch with someone to take care of the issues. I also included his phone number. The guy then later texted me, please, don't send any farewell emails. How the hell are they supposed to know what's going on, and more importantly, who is going to take care of them? You, Al. Edit, on the email and CC, I also begged the company's owner. If there was a way to get this asshole fired, I would. He deserves it, My manager during my 6-month stint in a franchise sandwich shop. I didn't have high expectations working fast food, but seriously super incompetent. Continually scheduled me for 30 hours a week or more, despite the fact that I was hired for 15 hours only. This was a second job. During university, I was responsible for finding people to cover my hours. Was sometimes scheduled for 2 hours at a time only, illegal. Often paychecks were short pay for entire shifts. Regularly didn't schedule enough people, one employee for dinner or lunch hour. And we were reprimanded for not being fast enough. Single sandwich maker who's also on cash serving a line of 15 people. Not fun. No discount on food or drink. Routinely didn't order cleaning supplies, enough meat, basic supplies. Wouldn't on a new sandwich specials advertised in our area like the other shops did. No new sandwiches, either. No training for new employees, just put them on the sandwich line, and yelled at them if they didn't know how much cheese to add. Required employees so pick up her kids from school, watch them, pick up her dry cleaning, etc. Can't believe I gave it 6 months. No discount on food or drink. That is the worst at any food place. Boss at my last job. I was a low on the ladder financial analyst. I was so excited for the job and the pay and the benefits. I was by no means rich, but was going to make $30,000 to $40,000 a year, which would pay all my bills with a little left to save, get any extras for my child, and do my nails once a month, or go out with friends once in a while. I was so happy. Well, my boss had the most personable girl in the department train me, and she did it incorrectly. I found out the same thing had happened with 2 other people in my department. I had no idea I had errors, until she had my 2 supervisors pull me aside. I asked if they could train me instead. I requested retraining, SOPs, asked questions when I had them. I was improving, which is what the boss asked for. She gave no benchmark, no percentage. She wrote me up, because I had errors after 2 weeks. But everyone else did as well. Well, one morning I caught the girl who trained me poorly going through my work that I hadn't corrected or submitted yet, and making copies to give to my boss. I knew right then that she was going to fire me eventually and there was nothing I could do. It was awful. When I was fired, she admitted a training issue, and she was just like, "What do you want me to do about it?" I'll let her have it after that, without yelling or anything. My position has been filled and vacated 5 times in 4 months. I've been unemployed, without insurance that I need, and being stressed out daily. I'm absolutely heartbroken. I worked as a receptionist for a couple months, and if one thing was out of place in the entire lobby my boss would yell at me, and for some reason say I'm wasting money. She would do this repeatedly, and I never understood why. Sometimes when things were out of place in the lobby I didn't have the energy to get up and fix it, and she would just keep saying I'm wasting money. I never understood it until one week I would grab chairs and purposely mess them up. I would tip over trash cans with small amounts of garbage, and so on. That week I got paid $80 less. I checked all my checks, and realized that the more the lobby was messed up the less I got paid. Once I confronted her about, and she gave me the money back, but it was still pretty ed up. She was rude as. My boss and owner of the company made fun of a lady for her baby dying after birth. She had purchased an educational online course from us, and it had expired during the time she was grieving. It had only been a few months, and she was asking for an extension and even offered to pay. He thought it was hilarious to call me and another co-worker into his office and have us stand there while he read dead baby jokes to us. It was horrific. I used to do a lot of yard and repair work for a number of ranch owners before becoming an actual ranch hand. I had one woman who, although was very nice, was always attaching new conditions to the work I agreed to do for the amount of payment I received. For instance, I would agree to repair, paint, and lacquer her barn, then also clean her gutters, and shovel dirt for her for about $350 over a 3-day job. When I'm nearing completion she decides that she also wants me to clean her stalls, clean her livestock's water, and help replace various hoses, and stall doors for her horses. She didn't agree to pay me more for my extra work, and said she would only pay me half if I didn't do everything she wanted. So she tacked on a half more things for me to do that weren't agreed upon. I sucked it up and did it anyways, and with a smile on my face. I'd rather have my reputation untarnished than my income. Can't make money if no one will hire you because your credibility is questioned, even if it is only mouth to mouth. I used to work for a local pizza place / fine Italian dining restaurant. There were a few things about the place that I can remember. 1. He would take all our tips. Although it is legal in the province I'm in, Manitoba, it is still very frowned upon. It was also very disheartening when you give someone a good customer experience they tell you they are going to tip you well only for you not to see any of it. 2. We didn't get paid for any stat holidays or overtime. I estimated I lost about $2,000 over the course of a year and a half. I would often put in as much time as possible as I needed the money desperately but never got paid for all of it. It was demoralizing every time I got my paycheck to see a number so small for the amount of work I was putting in. 3. We never got any breaks. By law we are to be given a break every 5.5 hours. If we ever asked to go on break he would say no and send us back to work. I also never got any chance to take a 10-minute break in a time. 4. We would often get sent home if it wasn't busy before 3 hours of our shift was up only to not get paid for 3 hours of work. By law we have to get paid for 3 hours of work at least. A coworker of mine brought this up to him only for him to fire him on the spot for a made-up excuse. TLDR, you can have a boss with a Thai boss but a boss that SU is the worst kind of boss. I had 2 horrible bosses. First horrible boss was a manager at Pizza Hut, and she let her husband's friend grab my and brush up against me because she didn't want to upset her husband by firing or talking to his friend about it. I was 17, he was 46 at the time. My second horrible boss locked me in his office and told me that I'm his employee and I need to be obedient to his request, and then he requested I sit on his lap if I wanted to keep my job. He said that he needed to teach me how to be obedient to authority. This was only day 5 of working there. I told him to go himself, grabbed the key and left. I don't have to suffer fools like I did when I was 17. I had a job in a retail shop for a while. My boss was a complete moron. He was a loan shark and the shop was a front for him. He was arguably the worst businessman in human history. He did all sorts of brilliant. The time he mail ordered steroids to the store, and when they arrived, I signed for them and cut the box open expecting the contents to be office supplies. I was displeased to find vials of testosterone and oral Dianabol in it. Related to the last point, it wasn't uncommon for there to be used sharps lying around on top of the microwave once, falling out of a garbage bag, etc., and he'd claim they were insulin needles, and he was diabetic when confronted about it. He didn't lift weights or otherwise exercise, so when he did steroids he just screw tits. Had a goatee. He put up fake security cameras throughout the store, but insisted they were real. We put electrical tape over the fake lenses and eventually stole them when the store moved. Every employee he ever had stole a lot of money from him. I'm not proud of it, but I was definitely part of it. I hope he stubs his toe every day for the rest of his life. I worked at a daycare center in an inner city area almost 2 years ago. At first my boss and I got along great, and I loved the job. The kids, though they had their behavior problems, were adorable. It was during this time that the shootings of Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and others occurred. After those shootings, my boss targeted all her anger at white people on me, the only white person who worked there. She'd constantly point out the differences between white and black people to the kids, ask me if I agreed with the shootings multiple times per week, and micromanaged every move I made. However, I kept the job for a little while longer because I thought I was being overdramatic. Then, one day she sent 3 of the kids and I to the park. While we were there, a group of black teens started calling the kids, who were not even 10 yet, Uncle Toms, and throwing the N-bomb around, calling me a white and threatening to kick my if I didn't get the Out of here. So, I took the kids and left. My boss told me that we don't let our kids get bullied, and made me go back. Luckily her husband arrived a few minutes later with some of the other kids, and I left shortly after hysterically crying and quit. She had the audacity to call me racist, and gave me $14 out of the $200 paycheck she owed me, which I couldn't even fight, because of some bull paperwork I signed when I first started. I worked for a small cafe, doing a manager's amount of work, while being paid minimum wage, and when I contracted pink eye from caring for my sister, my boss got mad at me. After that I applied, and was hired, at Starbucks. His business fell apart without me there, and closed within 4 months of me leaving. I used to work for a municipality at their landfill sites. We had a new director come on board who is one of the most vile humans I've ever had the displeasure to know. He would transfer people from a home site that they had worked at for years to another that was as far away from their home as possible just for and giggles, and would come up with ridiculous excuses for doing it. He made rules that made life at work intolerable. i.e. staff working on the site were not allowed to speak to each other. We were not allowed to help each other. We were not allowed to help disabled people or seniors who came to dispose of stuff. In severe weather, i.e. heat waves, downpours, we were not allowed to seek shelter. The list goes on. This man is the person who I would gladly murder if I was positive to not get caught, because the world would be better off without him. He looked like Judd from Subway, and flirted with all the younger than 18 female employees. He was a complete douche to me, because I'm married with a child. Never mind that I was a department manager who knew her job. So he acted like Judd as well. I worked at a big box pet store. My boss put a sick mouse in a bag, and slammed it multiple times against my giant acrylic fish tank, until it died, because she didn't want to deal with the infirmary paperwork. I also offered said boss an interview at my dad's company. She had a dental or pharmacy tech certification, can't remember, because she had no experience in the field, and was having a hard time getting callbacks. She would have been making $5-8 more an hour if she had gotten hired. After I told my dad about the mouse incident, he discarded her paperwork. I don't want sociopaths on my team, he said. I started a carpentry apprenticeship with a self-employed when I was 17. I live in Wales, but unfortunately never learned Welsh, my country's language. Throughout the day he talked Welsh to me, knowing full well I didn't know what he was saying. He barely talked to me apart from telling me what to do. He didn't teach me really, just showed me, and expected me to do it. If I was even a minute late to meet him, he'd leave, and not pay me for the day. Sometimes I'd be cleaning his garden, and not even doing joinery work at all. I can keep going on, but I CBA with typing it all out. 2 years of being treated like every day amounts to a lot of stories to tell. I worked for a foster care agency for a short time. My boss / the owner was a housewife whose husband made good money, so she started the agency as a pet project. Obviously she had no idea what she was doing. She would come into the office and sit at my desk and cry to me about her husband, her family, her dogs and chickens, etc. It was super awkward. There was little to no training. It felt like she expected me to be a mind reader. When I took the job, I quit another full-time job that paid decently. She promised me I would get 40 hours a week, and that she would provide health insurance / benefits. I was lucky if I got 20 hours a week of work, and the insurance she promised never happened. I brought it up to her that I was not getting as much work as promised, so I was struggling financially. The next week, I was working with one of the foster kids and the boss calls me and lets me go over the phone. After she fires me, she tells me to go buy a pie for the foster child. I go back to the office to turn in my keys and phone, and took the biggest poop of my whole life in the office bathroom and didn't flush. It was Thanksgiving weekend, so nobody was coming in for at least 4 days. Petty, but it felt good. This super white trash 40-something chubby alcoholic woman with a pixie cut and jailhouse quality tats all over her body, including the word death on her knuckles. She was crazy and manipulative. She tried really hard to pit all the employees of the convenience store against each other. She spread rumors, told other employees who was tattling on them, or complaining that work wasn't done, even when it wasn't true. One of the highlights was when her fat teenage daughter came running into the store crying and asking if I'd seen her mom. I guess her mom and stepdad got into a massive fight. He tried to leave, so she jumped into the back of the pickup as he was pulling out of the driveway and took off down the road with her beating the top of the cab. Before she took over as manager, we all got along and liked working with each other. When I quit, everyone hated everyone else, and people were actively trying to get each other fired. This will be a cathartic exercise. I work for a university police department. In the Midwest, don't PM me asking what uni I work for, because I won't share that. It's happened before. A cop from Cleveland PD was hired as a director of public safety, police chief plus CEO of parking and bus transportation. Let's call him Roger, since that was the lying piece of S real name. Roger started off well. He held a mandatory racial diversity training, but he also had a photographer take headshots of us all, and promised us we'd receive a copy for personal use. A lot of cops like to have pics of themselves in uniform, since our job is a big part of our identity. We waited for weeks for those pictures, but they weren't provided to us. Finally, our union president approached Roger and asked what was up with the headshots, and he was told, "You're all fat guards who don't deserve pictures, and I'm not giving them to you." Wow. Sure, a couple of us were overweight, but to write us all off, most of whom were thin/in shape, as fat guards was cruel. Roger claimed he was a Marine. He proudly displayed a USMC flag in his office. When one of our officers asked him where he took boot, Roger didn't know what that meant. I'd never served in the military, but knew that was an inquiry about where you attended boot camp. Roger was married but I'm a board of trustees member. One day he called our dispatcher to say he'd be at an on-campus dining hall. The caller ID showed he was calling from a room in the hotel the university owned and managed. He'd been seen leaving with the BOTY member. I attended professional training with a couple co-workers. When we broke for lunch we found the guy from Cleveland PD sitting across from us. He asked us where we worked and we answered. "Oh, you're Roger's boys," he responded. He asked what we thought of Roger. We hated him, but didn't want our complaints to go right to Roger's ears, so we said, "It's okay." This Cleveland PD cop identified himself as a lieutenant and asked us what Roger had told us about himself. He said he was in charge of the SWAT team. CPD lieutenant. Bull. I was in charge of that team. He answered to me. What else did he tell you? That he was in the Marine Corps. CPD lieutenant. Bull. He never served in the military. What else did he tell you? He said he never drinks. CPD lieutenant. Bull. He drinks like a fish. What else did he tell you? Needless to say, I steeled myself with all of that information and confronted Roger on all his lies. He responded by telling more lies. At some point someone in the university's administrative staff decided Roger was more trouble than he was worth. By then he was eyeing his own secretary and didn't renew his contract. What a piece of what garbage Roger was. I could share many more of his lies, but I've had my say and feel better. Roger, if you read this, go yourself. You big-nosed, worthless pile of garbage. Guess what? We thrived after you left. Face. Had a manager that didn't last very long at the second Little Caesars I worked at. He had a few favorite employees, and I was definitely not one of them. I got super sick, and when I called in, running a 101 fever in a food establishment is no good, he informed me that if I called in again I'd be fired. The next day, I still had a 101, so I went to the doctor, got a note stating that I could not work, and took it, and my work shirt in. He then got over himself a couple and said to just come in when I felt better. A couple of months later I found out I was pregnant, so I informed him of said pregnancy and that I probably shouldn't lift sauce buckets. I was told that if I needed a doctor's note as proof of my pregnancy, I went to the doctor to get a test done from them, and it, of course, came back positive, and they sent a referral for an obgyn through my insurance. I took the proof from my doctor's office into work, and was told that, since it didn't come from an obgyn, I needed to lift sauce buckets, lift crates of 2-liter sodas, and I couldn't go to the bathroom when I felt I needed to relieve my morning sickness. He was fired a month later, when he made the mistake of overcharging someone $4,000 on a credit card reader. She was the absolute worst who got investigated later on. She pitted us against each other, and routinely blamed us for stuff out of our control. When I quit, I left Easter eggs for my replacement to find. Printed emails of her verbally abusing the office. That sort of thing. I cried every morning on the way to work, and the others in the office were on antidepressants. She also had sex in our office once. Dirty, ugly, poor excuse for a human. She said she was taking a vacation once when in reality she checked herself into a mental institute. Makes you appreciate what you have now. I worked for a non-profit. I left my last job because it was so stressful I found myself crying just thinking about having to log into work the next morning. I'd wake up crying in my sleep about work. If your job is making you so upset that you cry when you think about going back, it's time to find something else. He was in his 50s and tried to dress like a 20-year-old. His shirts were always too tight, so the buttons looked like they were about to break free and fly across the room. He never wore any kind of undershirt and always left 2 to 3 buttons undone at the top, showing off his gold chain and chest hair. The amount of cologne he wore made it impossible to breathe if he was too close to you, and you could always tell where he had been in the office as there was a trail of stink that followed him. He was employed at the company for 2 years, never learned how to use any of the systems, and would have to ask for help from his staff for even simple tasks. At our weekly check-in meetings, when we had them, if anyone had a question he would request you to set up another meeting to talk about it, and then never follow up. Thankfully, he has resigned. Psycho anti-men. I'm male. She would find any reason to yell at, demote, degrade her male employees. Often yelling at them in the most public places of the office. I even confirmed with my female coworkers to make sure that I wasn't overacting. Found out that all she would want to do with them in one-to-one meetings was talk about men/their husbands, and if, gasp, you loved your husband and didn't want to participate, you would be put on the blacklist with the men. The one who once said to me, the problem with women in the workplace is that they're moody, they talk too much, and they're useless for 1 week out of the month, because they're bleeding all over the place. They didn't fire him for that, but he did get canned for waking up behind one of his employees, who was sitting at the desk working, and slapping him in the side of the head. People were too stunned to say anything, just stared. Boss figured out he goofed and walked away without a work. Took a few weeks, but once people finally got the courage to band together and report him, he was fired that day. I had a boss that would go into his office every day at lunch and do lines. He would come out super pumped and ready to work. He was really a terrible boss. He got joy out of ripping off customers. He really was a minor devil. But I stayed there for a long time because I was the top biller in the consulting department, and I made him a ton of money, so I had special perks. I got weekly cash bonuses off the books, was sent home often on Fridays with a bottle of Dom and very little oversight when I was making money. But if I had a down week, it was living hell. 1 week we lost money on a project by going over by 2 hours that we couldn't bill. The project still profited something like $10K. We just lost 2 hours of my billable time. My current boss, he has no experience in our field of work. He's just the biggest, angriest guy on site and bullies everyone. Then he's sweet as pie to the office staff. They do love him, so if you stand up to him, You will get punishment work for a minimum of a month. One day I decided that the job just wasn't worth him. He started screaming at me and I decided I'm gonna punch this guy in the mouth. I made an angry beeline for him, and he immediately backed up and stared at his shoes. Now he just screams at everybody else, because he actually happens to be but he's still the biggest guy on site. A manager in an upscale seafood restaurant in a posh part of London. He was a short English guy, who had equally short temper and mood swings. Also his mood at work would sometimes depend on his relationship with his wife at that moment. He would have no problems becoming extremely annoyed at staff or even starting to shout. On the upside he was a strict but decent manager, and he was much more relaxed when outside of work, clubbing, pubs etc. Still I was feeling about 5 times better at work when he was not there, and one of the assistant managers were working. They were really great, relaxed guys. And they also did not like him. Worked at a school, and was the assistant manager. My manager constantly came into work high or hungover. She always talked about drinking in front of the kids, but wouldn't even let me mention the death of my best friend to anyone I worked with. She also hit on one of our workers daily, who was in a 5-year relationship, and the janitor told me he caught her with him in the storage closet having sex. Yeah, great example. This French guy who claimed he was descended from the House of Bourbon. He nicknamed himself the Sun King, and bragged he was going to melt all of us special little snowflakes with the power of his rays. When I asked why we didn't have an Employee of the Month, appreciation days or premium parking spots for top performers, he told me that was all American bull. And that the paycheck is your reward. I always got stuck training the new hires, but when I tried to explain it would be simpler to retain workers with recognition than pay, https://www.psychologitoday.com/blog/mindthemanager/201306/new employee study shows recognition matters more money. He would dismiss me as some and college boy who didn't know how the real world worked. You've been visited by the ghost of a very important man. Pay your respects by liking and subscribing, and he'll grant you 3 weeks of good luck.